Tonight, a Showbiz Tonight special event. Showbiz Tonight presents Real Star Stories, the Jackson 5.
Our music was positive. We were just kids with dreams and wanting to do something good.
Jermaine, Jackie, Tito, Marlon, and Michael. How these 5 kids from Gary, Indiana literally became an overnight sensation.
Said I don't want any kid acts.
And next thing you know, we were in the studio recording our first record.
And they were on their way to changing the face of music. The life, the legend, the Jackson 5. Welcome to the Showbiz Tonight special event. Showbiz Tonight presents Real Star Stories, the Jackson 5. Tonight, a revealing look at the 5 kids from Indiana who became one of the biggest musical acts in history. Millions of albums sold, countless artists' influence. Michael Jackson's career launched. A lasting legacy that will likely never be matched. One of the original members of the Jackson 5, Tito Jackson, is going to be joining me to share his fascinating stories. But first, we begin with that lasting legacy of the Jackson 5. It's a moment that wowed the nation. The Jackson 5's first national appearance in 1969 on the variety show The Hollywood Palace. The Jackson 5 burst onto the music scene in 1969 with their debut album Diana Ross Presents The Jackson 5. Their first single, I Want You Back, shot straight to #1.
I Want You Back is as perfect a single as anyone has ever made.
The man behind the music was Motown Records' legendary founder and owner, Berry Gordy. He says it was his assistant, Suzanne DePass, who discovered the Jackson 5.
I said I don't want any more kid acts. Susan DePass that insisted I at least take a look at them.
The oldest of the Jackson 5, Jackie Jackson, remembers that day they first met with Gordy in 1969.
We performed for his birthday, and we did our thing, and next thing you know, we were in the studio within a week, maybe 3 days, I guess, in the recording studio, recording our first record.
The first 4 singles they put out all went to #1. That had not been done before. That's an extraordinary way to come out and introduce yourself to the world.
Their next 2 LPs produced hit after hit on the Soul Singles Chart. I Want You Back, ABC, The Love You Save, and I'll Be There all went straight to #1.
Ladies and gentlemen, my friends, the Jackson 5.
You and I must make a pact.
The Jackson 5 immediately appeared on a slew of TV shows, including this early appearance in 1970 on The Jim Nabors Show. A 12-year-old Michael Jackson sings,
I'll be there.
As a kid, Michael was always beyond his years.
If you should ever find someone new.
To watch Michael Jackson in those early days when he was 10, 11 years old, it was superhuman to see what he was capable of.
The Jackson 5 were breaking records and getting noticed. And together, they were making history.
The Jackson 5 was the first African-American group to take over the households of America. They were the first black group to do that.
If you think about how politically charged, racially charged 1970 was, these were kids who were not changing and cleaning up that black style. It was modifying it in a way that translated to a pop crowd.
There may have been racial tensions in the U.S. in the early 70s, but you would never have known it watching the Jackson 5 on TV. Like in this 1971 appearance on The Flip Wilson Show, singing ABC.
There had been black singers who had made girls scream and swoon, but there hadn't been this kind of black, young, teen idol. That really wasn't something that we'd seen before.
Our music was positive. We were just kids with dreams and wanting to do something good.
More albums and more fame came to the Jackson 5.
The Jackson 5 were such a direct product of Joe Jackson's ambition.
Born and raised in Gary, Indiana, Joe and Katherine Jackson had 6 sons and 3 daughters.
I think from my father, he saw something in us.
Every free minute the Jacksons had outside of school, they practiced, and they competed in talent shows and contests around the nation.
We all traveled together. It was great. It was something that I never forget.
It was a family.
Doing the Apollo, the Uptown, all through there, Regal Theater in Chicago.
And a great learning experience for us.
In 1974, they took their album and its hit single, Dancing Machine, on the road.
She's a dancing machine.
Making historic television appearances on Soul Train and The Carol Burnett Show. And in the process, setting off a new dance craze, the robot.
Whatever was hot at the time, they would embrace it and make it better.
The Jacksons could look around and see that there were other musical forces that were changing, that were ahead of where Motown was, that black music was expanding. They started to bristle against the restrictions that Motown kept on them.
In 1974, their contract expired at Motown, and the Jackson 5 left their Motown roots and signed on to Epic.
Motown actually held the rights to the name Jackson 5, and so when the group left, they started calling themselves the Jacksons.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, the Jacksons!
With more creative freedom and the addition of their brother Randy, the newly branded Jacksons forged ahead and dove right in to disco.
They certainly had big hits after they were at Epic. They had Shake Your Body Down to the Ground,
Shake your body down to the ground.
Blame It on the Boogie,
Blame it on the boogie.
Heartbreak Hotel.
This is Heartbreak Hotel.
A significant number of major hits that still came at that point.
The Jacksons would release one final album in 1989, 2300 Jackson Street. But the Jackson 5 will be forever remembered as the young, vibrant kids from Indiana who influenced music and culture around the world. There is just so much more to the incredible Jackson 5 story, and here to share the J5 experience, a man who obviously had a front row seat to this real star story, an original member of Jackson 5, Tito Jackson. Tito, it is great to have you here. When the Jackson 5 made their debut all the way back in 1969, it really was as if all of America instantly fell in love with you guys. But you were all touring and competing for years before you made it big. What was that time like?
Oh, that was a lot of work and a lot of practicing and traveling. And actually, we had this little Volkswagen van that we used to pack with equipment. And we used to sleep and sit on the equipment because there was no seats in it. And we would ride for hours like this, whether we were going to St. Louis or Wisconsin or Chicago or New York. This is how it worked.
Hard to imagine you legends all crammed into a little VW van. And of course, life really changed when you first met Motown legend Berry Gordy at his mansion and you performed for him at his birthday party. Tell me about that experience.
Well, that was quite interesting because I remember the first time we saw the mansion, we were all in awe because we've never seen something so extravagant. And so Berry Gordy had this golf course in his yard, and he betted all of us, he would give us $100 if we can do a hole-in-one. We didn't know how hard it was to do a hole-in-one, but we tore up his whole yard trying to put that golf ball in the hole.
And you never could have imagined you'd be leading your lives as Berry Gordy led his lives as life went on for you all.
No, we couldn't imagine, but being under the wings of Motown, we knew that we would be okay.
Well, I want to bring in R&B singer and songwriter Johnny Gill. Johnny, it is great to have you here as well. And you, of course, were in the massively successful group New Edition, which was a boy band born in the 1980s. The Jackson 5 was probably the first ever African-American boy band. How did they specifically pave the way for your success?
Oh, my God. Without the Jacksons, there would definitely not be a New Edition. And the list goes on from Boys to Men to a lot of the boy bands that you see today. The Jacksons. The Jacksons started it all. And I tell you, it's like when I watch some of the footage here, it takes me back to a time and a place in my life when I was just a little kid, a little baby. And you know, when you're living in that moment, you really can't grasp what's really going on when it's happening. And it's like I'm sitting there looking and I'm just like, oh, my God, this is royalty. These guys have paved the way and opened the doors for so many of us.
And it's been great to watch you throughout the years, Johnny, first with the bands and then in your solo career, and it was clear that, you know, it was just part of your DNA, what the Jackson 5 brought to your life. But what to you is their lasting legacy?
Oh my God, you know, I've often said that what's written in stone could never be erased. And when you look at, you know, Tito, you guys might not have gotten that hole in one on the golf course, but you sure as heck got a lot of number ones. and that made up
in golfing terms, I think it was eagles all the way throughout their career. Johnny Gill, Tito Jackson, thank you so much. Please don't go anywhere. I want you back in a second to talk about the Jackson 5's dramatic impact on its youngest original member, that of course Michael. But first, the Jackson 5, musicians, cultural icons, and masters of merchandising.
To see the Jackson 5 as a cartoon on TV reaching into, you know, white households around the country on Saturday morning to kids who were their age and younger, that was a very powerful statement.
From cereal boxes to TV specials, the ABCs of J5 nostalgia. Next, you're watching a Showbiz Tonight special event. Showbiz Tonight presents Real Star Stories, the Jackson 5. The Jackson 5 weren't just a force of music, they were a force of fashion.
The Jackson 5 had such a clear visual identity with the afros, with the patch suits and the bell bottoms.
Their variety show in the mid-70s, the Jacksons brought their style into living rooms across the country.
It was taking a lot of the young black street style and putting that out to a general public, and that was a very powerful thing.
Welcome back to the Showbiz Tonight special event. Showbiz Tonight presents Real Star Stories, the Jackson 5. I'm AJ Hammer, and now, behind the Jackson 5's money-making empire. You know, if you grew up in the 70s, you were probably up on Saturday mornings, and before you even changed out of your PJs, you were watching the Jackson 5 cartoon, or maybe you took a Jackson 5 lunchbox to school or watched their star-studded variety shows. The Jackson 5 were masters of branding and commercial success. Not only did they grace the cover of magazines and cereal boxes, they also had major endorsement deals. Like this 1973 Alphabets commercial. Through much of the 70s, they had their own variety show and Jackson specials. And they had their own hit cartoon show called the Jackson 5.
You remember how it always dug the records when we played them?
I sure do.
To see the Jackson 5 as a cartoon on TV reaching into, you know, white households around the country on Saturday morning, that was a very powerful statement and an impactful thing.
Well, let the nostalgia talk begin. Joining me again from Hollywood, R&B singer and songwriter Johnny Gill, right now in New York, radio host and editor of EgyptSaidSo.com, Egypt Sherrod, and Janet Hubert, the author of the book JG and the BC Kids. She also played Aunt Viv on the 90s sitcom The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Janet, you grew up in the Jacksons' generation. Oh, yeah. What was it like to see a black pop group go so mainstream at a time when, let's face it, there were still some serious civil rights issues in this country?
Well, for me, growing up in a high school in a small town where there was probably maybe 10 of us, 10 black kids in the whole town, it was monumentous. It was like nothing we had ever seen. It gave you the hope and the feeling that you could actually make it from a small town. And I had 5 brothers, so we all grabbed our Coca-Cola bottles and we put our microphones on and we all wanted to be the Jacksons. It was spectacular.
And look at you, you made it. And
yeah.
So did Johnny Gill. Johnny, you were also a product of the Jackson 5 generation. And I've heard where you have said that as a kid, watching a Jackson 5 special was like watching an event. Why?
Oh my God, it was like the whole family would gather around, and it was like, you know, we were just in awe. I mean, as kids, we didn't believe that they were really real.
Egypt, I want to ask you, as somebody else who really got to follow the Jacksons along as you were growing up, how did you feel that they impacted America, not just musically, but culturally?
Well, you have to think, at that time when the Jacksons first came out, we're in the middle of the civil rights movement. So black people were ready to break out, not only break out and dance, break out and scream, break out and tear the walls down. And to have them on television, I'm sure you can agree, Janet, was like, oh my God, black people are on TV. Mom, I can do it too. But the bigger implications there were, now you had little white girls and little white boys also singing and dancing to the same song. So they also helped to bridge the cultural gap there.
And wanting afros at that time.
Yeah, it's true. It's
Why
true.
can't my hair stand up
If you look at pictures from back then and what was going on, there was a lot of that going on.
All about that Afro.
Let's go back to somebody who was right there and brought it all to us. Tito Jackson, did you have any idea what an impact you were making in all of these ways on an entire generation of kids?
No, us as children, you know, we were just having fun. We loved music, and we were performing with people like Jackie Wilson, Gladys Knight, Miracles, and so on and so on. And we wanted to be like these guys. We would study and stare these guys to death, and that's all we wanted, kids with a dream, to be superstars.
And at a point, Tito, I imagine you probably got used to either seeing footage of yourselves on television, maybe even seeing yourselves in the magazines or on posters. But seriously, we're looking right now at cereal boxes that had your pictures on it. There were lunch boxes. I'm pretty sure I had a Jackson 5 thermos at one point. What was that like for you, seeing yourselves on all of this paraphernalia and merchandising?
Well, it was very exciting. But there was so much in our life at that time, you know, doing new things that we didn't have time to concentrate and stop and enjoy all the things that were happening around us. Like people ask me today, what was it like you just asked. And actually, it's hard to grasp it because we were doing so much and we were just kids with a dream, and it's hard to grasp. And my brothers and I talk about it all the time. And we say, can you believe we did so much as little children? We can't believe it ourselves.
You know, it's funny. It's almost hard to believe, but maybe we enjoyed the ride a little more than they were able to because they were right in the mix of it.
Yeah, I was just thinking.
It was work to us.
From the time Diana Ross introduced you, the next day you were overnight sensations, and it was probably a whirlwind that you could barely remember. And when you look at the pictures and the albums and the videos, you say, oh, I remember when. But in that moment, you really didn't get a chance to enjoy it.
Janet Hubert, Egypt Sherrod, Johnny Gill, I thank you all. Tito, please stay right where you are, because when we come back, Michael Jackson's brother Tito, back with me, he's going to tell us the dramatic story of how the Jackson 5 molded Michael into the pop sensation we came to know and love. This is a Showbiz Tonight special event. Showbiz Tonight presents Real Star Stories, the Jackson 5.
Michael Jackson is the greatest performer that ever lived, right? And I think he influenced generations of people. We haven't even felt the full impact of it, of the brothers yet. You know, they're amazing. All friends of mine, by the way.
So how did the Jackson 5 impact its youngest original member, Michael Jackson? You hear the door slam. The moves of Michael Jackson's 1983 smash hit Thriller owe a lot to his Jackson 5 roots, especially their work after 1975.
Those later Jackson's records really were kind of a canvas where Michael tried out a lot of the things that then fully flowered on Thriller and in his solo work.
Watching Michael on the hit variety show The Jacksons in 1977, you can't help but see the roots of Thriller and so much more.
You're fighting for your life inside of.
He did the robot and everybody went insane, and that was years before he did the moonwalk.
With me again, Michael's brother and Jackson 5 bandmate Tito. So Tito, there's really no doubt that Michael got a lot of his dance moves that made him famous in his solo career straight from the Jacksons and the Jackson 5. How did you guys develop those memorable, incredible moves?
Oh, well, actually, we used to put ourselves in a room, you know, and we would practice all day. We would put the song on that we had choreographed, and Jackie Marlin and Michael would stay there, and they would work out dance moves and get in front of the mirror and say, this worked, that doesn't work. And once they had something that worked, they would practice it for hours.
Yeah, it was the kind of thing, Tito, that seemed as natural as it appeared to come to you guys and to Michael later on. It was a lot of hard work, wasn't it?
It was a whole lot of work. I can't even imagine that I did all of that work. And I enjoy it today. Looking back on it, it's a God's gift, and I'm very grateful, but I wouldn't want to go through that again. That was, it was hard.
Well, it's nice to
Very
look
hard.
back. At least you know you had it in you at some point, right? That's always a good thing. So when you look at Michael's later work, when you watch that Thriller video, when you watch Billie Jean, do you clearly see the Jackson 5's influence in Michael's moves? I know he evolved, but you see the J5 there, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. You know, he's part of the product. You can't peel something off the apple and not call it an apple. You know, he's definitely a part of the product. And that was training camp for Michael. Everything he did afterwards were just things that he had accomplished during the Jackson 5 as far as his dance moving and his everything about him, his video ideas, everything. We used to brainstorm and talk about things that was out of the circle and try to come up with things that were unusual and different. That was our whole thing. We wanted to be different.
It was such magic, and it certainly was different. Tito Jackson, thank you so much for sharing your amazing story with us tonight. That is it for the Showbiz Tonight special event. Showbiz Tonight presents Real Star Stories, the Jackson 5. I'm AJ Hammer. Thank you for watching, and for the latest entertainment news, be sure to check out CNN.com/ShowbizTonight.